My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 28 years old. And 15 years ago, my parents threw me out of the house with 2 garbage bags and a sentence that still echoes in my head sometimes. If you won't sacrifice for this family, then you're not part of it. Last month, those same parents walked into my Uncle Nathaniel's while reading wearing expensive clothes and confident smiles, absolutely certain they were about to inherit millions. By the end of that meeting, my mother looked like she couldn't breathe, and my father couldn't even lift his eyes from the floor. But to understand why, you need to know what happened the summer I turned 13. Before we continue, take 1 second to subscribe and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Stories like this hit differently when you realize how many people out there survived families that were supposed to protect them. I grew up in a small neighborhood outside Tacoma, Washington, tiny house, 1 bathroom, always cold in winter because the heater barely worked. My father, Gregory Carter, repaired engines at a local auto garage. Quiet man. Not cruel exactly, just weak. The kind of person who lets stronger personalities decide what's right because it's easier than conflict. My mother, Linda, worked customer service at a grocery store and controlled our house with terrifying precision. Everything in our home had rankings. Who mattered more, who deserved more, who was worth investing in, and from as early as I can remember, that person wasn't me. My older sister Vanessa was the center of everything, 2 years older. Blonde hair, bright smile, naturally outgoing. People adored her instantly. Teachers, neighbors, relatives, even strangers, and my mother loved that attention like oxygen. Vanessa got dance lessons, new clothes, birthday parties with rented decorations and bakery cakes. When I turned 13 3 months after Vanessa's huge 15th birthday celebration, Mom brought home a discounted grocery store cake with another kid's name scraped off the frosting. I wish I were exaggerating, I'm not. At 13, you don't fully understand emotional neglect yet. You just feel confused all the time, like everyone else received instructions for how to be loved and yours got lost somewhere. The moment everything changed happened in May of 2010. My middle school science teacher secretly submitted my application to a prestigious engineering summer academy at the University of Washington. 6 weeks, full scholarship. Housing included, only 40 students selected statewide. I didn't tell my family when I applied because hope felt dangerous in that house. Then the acceptance letter arrived. I still remember opening it at the kitchen counter while sunlight hit the paper. For one unbelievable moment, I felt chosen. Important. Seen. Then Vanessa found out about an expensive theater program in Los Angeles her drama coach recommended. No scholarship. Cost nearly $4,000. That night during dinner, my mother announced her solution like she was discussing grocery coupons instead of my future. Emma, you'll decline the science program. I looked up slowly. What? Vanessa's opportunity is more important long-term, she explained calmly. You're adaptable, you'll find something else. Adaptable, that word still makes my stomach turn, because what she really meant was disposable. I stared down at my plate trying to breathe normally while something sharp unfolded inside my chest. Then, before fear could stop me, I said no. The table went silent instantly. Even Dad stopped chewing. Mom looked at me carefully, dangerously carefully. This scholarship was earned by me, I said quietly. I'm not giving it away. My mother's expression changed completely then, not anger, worse, disappointment. Like she had finally realized I might become difficult to control. And 3 days later, I came home from the library to find my entire life stuffed into garbage bags sitting on the front porch. At first, I honestly thought it was a joke. That's the terrifying part. When you grow up emotionally neglected, your brain automatically searches for harmless explanations before accepting painful ones. I stood on the porch staring at the 2 black garbage bags while my backpack slid off my shoulder. Clothes, school books, shoes, everything I owned shoved together like trash waiting for pickup day. Then the front door opened. My mother stepped outside slowly, arms folded across her chest. She looked calm, completely calm, and somehow that scared me more than yelling would've. I called your Uncle Nathaniel, she said. He's coming to get you. I blinked. What, from now on you'll live with him? The world actually tilted for a second. At 13, your brain isn't built to process abandonment logically, it just fractures around it. I don't understand, I whispered. Mom sighed softly like I was making this unnecessarily complicated. "You've made your priorities clear," she said. "This family needs unity and you refuse to cooperate." Cooperate. That was her word for surrender. Behind her, I could see my father standing in the hallway. He wasn't stopping this. Wasn't arguing, wasn't even looking directly at me. And honestly, that hurt almost more than my mother's cruelty. Because betrayal from weak people leaves different scars. You keep wondering if they ever would have chosen you under different circumstances. I looked upstairs toward Vanessa's bedroom window. The curtain shifted slightly. She was watching. When our eyes met, she stepped back immediately, never came downstairs, never said goodbye. That silence followed me for years. "Mom," my voice cracked, "please." Her face hardened instantly. "No dramatics, Evelyn. Nathaniel will provide a better environment for someone like you." Someone like you, I wanted to ask what that meant. Problem child, burden, mistake, but deep down, I think I already knew. She'd been telling me my place my entire life. I just finally heard it clearly. The front door closed behind her after that, and I stayed outside alone for 4 hours. No porch light, no blanket, no dinner, nothing. The sun disappeared slowly while neighborhood lights turned on one by one across the street. I remember watching families through windows, people eating together, laughing, existing normally, and thinking, what did I do wrong? That question destroys children, because abandoned kids almost always assume abandonment is earned. At 10:17 p.m., headlights finally turned into the driveway, a dark blue Honda sedan. Uncle Nathaniel climbed out immediately, tall, broad shoulders, silver beginning to show through his dark beard. He crossed the lawn quickly, took one look at the garbage bags beside me, and his entire face changed. Not shock, rage. Controlled adult rage. The kind children instantly recognize as protection. He didn't ask questions first, didn't lecture, didn't hesitate. He just wrapped both arms around me so tightly I couldn't breathe properly. And that's when I finally started crying. Not polite tears, violent ones, the kind that come from fear finally finding somewhere safe to land. "You're okay," he whispered repeatedly. "I've got you now." Nobody had ever said words like that to me before, not really. He loaded the garbage bags into the trunk himself. Then, right before getting into the driver's seat, he walked back to the front door and knocked once. My father answered. Nathaniel didn't yell, didn't threaten him. Honestly, what he said was worse. "You failed her," he said quietly. Dad looked down immediately. Then Nathaniel added one final sentence. "And one day, you're going to understand exactly what that cost." We drove north towards Seattle through heavy rain after that. I sat silently in the passenger seat, clutching the sleeves of my hoodie while streetlights blurred across the windshield. At one point, Nathaniel reached over and placed a folded paper bag in my lap. Inside was a cheeseburger and fries, still warm. That tiny act almost broke me again, because neglected children remember strange things forever. Not grand speeches, not dramatic rescues, warm food, gentle voices, someone remembering you might be hungry. What I didn't know that night was that while I sat crying in Nathaniel's car, my parents had signed documents inside that house. Legal documents, papers that would erase me from their family completely. And 15 years later, those same signatures were about to destroy every plan they had. Uncle Nathaniel's house in Seattle felt enormous to me, not because it was some mansion. It wasn't. 3 bedrooms, small backyard, old hardwood floors that creaked near the stairs. But for the first time in my life, I had space that actually felt safe. The first thing Nathaniel showed me wasn't rules, or chores, or expectations. It was my room, a real room, fresh blankets, desk near the window. Lamp already turned on because he knew we arrived late. "I wasn't sure what color you liked," he said awkwardly, "so I just kept it simple." I stood there staring at the pale blue walls, trying not to cry again. Because children who grow up unwanted become overwhelmed by basic kindness. Nathaniel never treated me like a burden after that, not once. And honestly, that confused me more than cruelty ever had. He owned a commercial property company called Carter Holdings. Nothing massive at the time. A few office buildings, small retail spaces, storage properties. But he built every inch of it himself after working construction jobs for nearly a decade. No wife, no children, just work, then suddenly me. And somehow he adjusted faster than I did. That first summer, he helped me enroll in the engineering academy my mother tried taking away. Every morning, he woke up early to drive me across Seattle because he refused to let me take 2 buses alone before sunrise. One morning during the second week, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. "Why are you helping me?" Nathaniel looked genuinely confused. "Because you're my niece." Simple answer. But I remember staring out the car window afterward thinking, then why didn't my own parents act like it? Over the next few years, my entire life changed quietly. Not magically, quietly, which is how real healing usually happens. Freshman year, I joined robotics club. Sophomore year, I won a statewide mathematics competition. Junior year, I started interning part-time at Carter Holdings, entering lease data and organizing property files. Nathaniel taught me business the same way some parents teach baseball, patiently, consistently, never making me feel stupid for asking questions. "You're sharper than most adults I hire," he told me once while reviewing spreadsheets together. That compliment mattered more to me than any trophy ever could. Because children raised without affection become addicted to earning worth. By 18, I graduated valedictorian with a scholarship to the University of Washington Business Program. Nathaniel sat front row at graduation wearing a tie so crooked it actually made me smile. After the ceremony, he hugged me and whispered something I never forgot. "You were never hard to love, kid." God, that sentence. Sometimes healing enters your life through one line spoken at exactly the right moment. College passed in a blur of internships, late-night studying, and long conversations with Nathaniel about real estate investments over takeout containers. While other students partied, I worked. Not because Nathaniel demanded it, because fear still lived inside me. Fear that everything good could disappear suddenly if I stopped proving I deserved it. At 22, I graduated magna cum laude. At 24, I earned my CPA license. At 26, Nathaniel promoted me to Chief Financial Officer of Carter Holdings. By then, the company portfolio had grown to nearly $25 million, and every step forward felt surreal. Not because of the money, because the girl abandoned on a porch with garbage bags had somehow built a future anyway. Meanwhile, my biological family contacted me exactly 3 times in 15 years. First, in 2012. My mother called Nathaniel asking for financial help after Dad lost his mechanic job. She never once asked how I was doing. Second, in 2017, Vanessa mailed me a wedding invitation with no handwritten note, no apology, nothing personal, just expectation I didn't go. Then in 2021, my mother emailed me after reading an article about Carter Holdings expanding across King County. Subject line, "Checking in." Funny how people suddenly remember you exist once success becomes visible. I deleted it without replying, not because I hated them, because I had finally learned something important. Forgiveness doesn't require reopening doors that nearly destroyed you the first time. And then, in late 2024, everything changed again. Nathaniel was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, advanced stage, and deep down, I think he already knew exactly what would happen after he was gone. Nathaniel lasted 8 months after the diagnosis. 8 brutal months of medications, hospital visits, specialists, and pretending things were more hopeful than they actually were. But even near the end, he stayed calm. That was always his way, steady, like panic was something other people did. One night in December, I found him sitting alone in the backyard wrapped in a heavy gray blanket staring at the Seattle skyline. Rain mist floated through the porch light. "You should be inside," I said softly. "So should you," he answered. Typical Nathaniel response, half concern, half deflection. I sat beside him anyway. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then finally he said, "You know none of this was your fault, right?" I looked at him carefully. Because after 15 years, he still somehow knew exactly where the fractures inside me lived. "I know," I lied. Nathaniel smiled faintly. "No," he said gently. "You understand it logically, that's different." God, that man understood people too well. He reached into his coat pocket then and handed me a folded envelope. "Emergency contacts, legal information, company instructions," he explained. "Everything you'll need eventually." I hated hearing him talk like that. Like absence was already becoming practical. "Nathaniel, listen to me." The tone changed, firm now, important. "You built this life yourself," he said quietly. "I just gave you a safe place to start." I looked down immediately because tears were already threatening. That's the thing about unconditional love. Once you finally experience it, you realize how violently abnormal your childhood actually was. Nathaniel passed away peacefully on February 28, 2025. I was holding his hand at Swedish Medical Center when it happened. And honestly, losing him felt like losing gravity, like the one person anchoring my world suddenly disappeared. The memorial service 3 days later filled an entire church. Business owners, employees, charity directors, tenants from properties he'd helped personally during hard times. People traveled from multiple states just to speak about his kindness. That told me everything. Real character leaves witnesses behind. My biological family didn't attend the memorial. But exactly 1 week later, my phone rang from an unknown Portland number. I almost ignored it, then I answered. "Evelyn?" My mother's voice hadn't changed at all, still carried that same careful sharpness underneath fake warmth. "Linda, not Mom, never again." A short silence followed, probably because she noticed immediately. "I heard about Nathaniel," she said softly. "I'm very sorry." I stayed quiet, then she continued. "I also heard there's going to be a will reading." There it was, not grief, not concern, business, always business. "How did you hear about that?" I asked calmly. "We hired an attorney." Interesting. Meaning Dad and Vanessa were involved too. Apparently 15 years of silence disappeared once money entered the conversation. "I think we deserve to be present," she continued carefully. "After all, Nathaniel was family. Family." That word almost made me laugh out loud. Later that afternoon, I met with Nathaniel's estate attorney, Margaret Holloway, in her downtown Seattle office overlooking Elliott Bay. Professional woman, sharp eyes. The kind of person who notices details before most people finish speaking. She slid legal paperwork across the desk slowly. "Your parents filed a challenge against the estate this morning," she explained. I stared at her. "What?" "They're alleging undue influence," she continued. "Their claim argues you manipulated Nathaniel during his illness and isolated him from surviving family members." For a second, I genuinely couldn't process the audacity. The people who abandoned me at 13 were now accusing me of manipulating the man who saved my life. Margaret watched my expression carefully. "They're demanding 50% of the estate," she added. 50%. Of a company they never helped build, of a life they never cared about. And somehow that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came next. Margaret opened another folder slowly, then asked one question that changed everything. "Evelyn, did Nathaniel ever tell you your parents legally signed away their parental rights?" For a second, I honestly thought I misunderstood her. The words didn't fit inside reality properly. "Signed away what?" Margaret opened the folder carefully and slid a yellowed document across the desk. Old county seal, official signatures, notary stamp. The paper looked ordinary, which somehow made it more horrifying. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights and transfer of legal guardianship." My stomach dropped instantly. The date underneath read July 18, 2010. 3 days after they threw me out. I stared at the signatures at the bottom. Gregory Carter, Linda Carter, Nathaniel Brooks. Everything inside me went cold. "They didn't just send you away informally," Margaret said quietly. "They legally surrendered parental responsibility and transferred full guardianship to Nathaniel." I couldn't breathe properly for a second, because suddenly that night on the porch changed shape entirely inside my head. While 13-year-old me sat outside clutching garbage bags in the dark, my parents were inside signing paperwork erasing me from their lives. Legally, permanently. "I didn't know," I whispered. Margaret nodded slowly. "Nathaniel never told you?" I shook my head. No wonder he always said I owed them nothing. No wonder he never pushed reconciliation. He knew, the entire time, he knew exactly how completely they abandoned me. "What does this mean for their claim?" I asked finally. Margaret leaned back slightly. "It means your father has no legal standing through family connection," she explained. "By signing those documents, your parents voluntarily severed the parental relationship themselves." I looked back down at the papers, and weirdly, I didn't feel rage first. I felt grief. Because some tiny part of me had apparently spent 15 years believing maybe they regretted it. Maybe they didn't fully understand what they were doing. Maybe someday things could be repaired, but legal paperwork changes that fantasy. This wasn't emotional negligence anymore, this was calculated abandonment. Margaret folded her hands carefully. Nathaniel anticipated this situation, she said. Of course he did. That man planned for everything. He left very specific instructions regarding any estate challenge from your biological family. I almost laughed bitterly. Even dying couldn't stop him from protecting me. Margaret continued. You have two options. First, we offer a settlement, enough money to make them withdraw the claim quietly. How much? 500,000 to 1 million. The number barely registered, not because it wasn't huge, because the idea itself disgusted me. Paying people to disappear after they already abandoned me once. And the second option? Margaret's expression sharpened slightly. We proceed with the will reading publicly exactly as Nathaniel requested. I already knew there was more. What aren't you saying? She hesitated briefly, then answered. Nathaniel wanted the truth entered into official record. Those words stayed with me all night afterward. I drove home through heavy Seattle rain, replaying memories I suddenly understood differently. Every birthday Nathaniel celebrated like it mattered. Every graduation. Every late-night conversation where he quietly reminded me I deserved love without conditions. He wasn't compensating for difficult parents. He was raising a child who had legally been discarded. That realization hit harder than anything else. Around midnight, I walked into Nathaniel's old office inside the house. Everything still smelled faintly like cedarwood and coffee. His reading glasses sat beside paperwork exactly where he left them. And hanging above the bookshelf, a framed photo from my college graduation. Nathaniel smiling proudly beside me. Underneath it sat a handwritten note in his familiar messy script. You were always mine. God, that broke me completely. I sat there crying harder than I had even at the funeral. Because grief changes when you realize how deeply someone truly loved you. At 7:12 the next morning, I called Margaret. No settlement, I said immediately. Silence. Then she asked carefully, You're certain? Yes, because they chose this. They filed the lawsuit. They demanded the public hearing. And if my parents wanted to sit inside that room pretending they were still family, then they were going to hear the truth out loud in front of everyone. The will reading was scheduled for Friday, March 14, 2025. 2 o'clock, Holloway and Associates, 47th floor of Columbia Center, Seattle's tallest building. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents spent years trying to make me feel small. Now they were about to walk into one of the highest offices in the city, expecting millions from the life I built without them. The days leading up to the meeting passed in a blur of paperwork, legal preparation, and emotional exhaustion. My best friend, Sophia Ramirez, stayed beside me through all of it. We met 3 years earlier when she joined Carter Holdings as Human Resources Director, and she became the first person outside Nathaniel who ever fully understood my history. Wednesday night, she sat across from me in my office surrounded by stacks of documents. 49 emails, she said, scrolling through her laptop. Nathaniel documented everything. Apparently, Nathaniel kept records for years. Emails detailing why he became estranged from my father long before I ever arrived. Financial records, guardianship files, even journal entries about the night he picked me up. Sophia looked up slowly. Your parents have no idea how prepared he was. Of course they didn't. People like Linda always assume narratives matter more than facts. That confidence was about to destroy them. One email from 2011 hit me especially hard. Nathaniel wrote, Evelyn apologizes every time she asks for food seconds. That tells me everything I need to know about the house she came from. I had to step out of the office after reading that. Because I didn't even realize I used to do it. Trauma hides inside habits so quietly you stop noticing them. Thursday evening, I met with my therapist, Dr. Claire Benson. She'd helped me rebuild myself piece by piece through my 20s. You're not doing this for revenge, she reminded me calmly. Then why does part of me want them embarrassed? I asked honestly. Dr. Benson smiled slightly. Because accountability feels uncomfortable for people who avoided it for years. That sentence stayed with me. Accountability, not revenge, different things entirely. Friday arrived cold and gray, classic Seattle weather. I wore a navy-tailored suit Nathaniel bought me after my CFO promotion. Simple, professional, controlled. Because Nathaniel always said the strongest people in the room never need to announce themselves loudly. When I entered the conference room at 1:45 p.m., 14 people were already seated. Margaret Holloway sat at the head of the table beside 2 associates. Senior executives from Carter Holdings lined the far side. Representatives from several charities Nathaniel supported occupied seats near the windows. Seattle Children's Foundation, Habitat Northwest, education outreach programs, people Nathaniel trusted enough to witness this. Margaret nodded toward the chair directly across from her. Center seat? Mine. I sat calmly arranging my folders while rain streaked the massive glass windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Then at exactly 2:03 p.m., the elevator doors opened, and my mother walked out like she owned the building. Black dress, pearl necklace, perfect makeup. Behind her came my father, looking older and heavier than I remembered. Then Vanessa, and finally their attorney, tall, silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of man who charged by the hour and enjoyed intimidating people professionally. Linda spotted me immediately. "Evelyn," she said warmly, like we were reconnecting relatives instead of strangers separated by 15 years of abandonment. "Linda, not Mom, never again." That single word made her pause, tiny crack in the performance. "I was hoping we could speak privately before this starts," she said carefully. "The reading begins in 2 minutes," I replied calmly. Margaret stood then. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Miss Carter, your seating is arranged along the side wall, not at the table. Not among beneficiaries, off to the side." And judging by the look on Linda's face, she absolutely hated that. My mother didn't sit down quietly. Of course she didn't. People like Linda survive by controlling the atmosphere around them. Even now, walking into a legal proceeding she barely understood, she still believed performance could overpower reality. Instead of taking her assigned seat, she drifted toward the charity representatives near the window with practiced sadness painted across her face. "I'm Linda Carter," she announced softly enough for the room to hear. "Nathaniel's sister-in-law. We were very close before unfortunate family complications." Complications? Interesting word for abandoning a 13-year-old child. One of the Seattle Children's Foundation directors smiled politely without responding. Linda continued anyway. "It's tragic how some people create division inside families." There it was, the narrative. Still trying to paint herself as the victim after 15 years. I kept my eyes on my folder, didn't react. Nathaniel taught me something important about manipulators. Silence terrifies them more than arguments. Vanessa finally sat down against the side wall, looking deeply uncomfortable. Honestly, she seemed different from what I remembered. Tired, less polished, like life had quietly worn away the confidence she used to carry naturally. But I wasn't ready to analyze that yet. Their attorney, Martin Hale, opened his leather briefcase and began taking notes immediately. Watching, calculating, looking for emotional reactions he could use later. I gave him nothing. Linda wasn't finished performing, though. "A child rejected by her family usually gives people a reason," she said loudly enough for several executives to hear. The room shifted uncomfortably. One of Carter Holdings' senior property managers actually frowned at her openly. "Good. Let them see her clearly." For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't protecting my parents from the consequences of who they were. Margaret checked the clock precisely at 2:10 p.m., then she broke the seal on a thick cream-colored envelope. The room fell silent instantly. "This is the last will and testament of Nathaniel Brooks," she began formally. Linda leaned forward slightly, confident again, probably imagining account balances already. Margaret moved through the legal introduction carefully. Sound mind, witness signatures. Psychological competency evaluation completed before execution. That section visibly irritated Martin Hale immediately, because their undue influence argument depended on proving Nathaniel lacked mental clarity. And Nathaniel, apparently predicting everything, had already destroyed that possibility before dying. Then Margaret reached the financial inventory. Commercial properties assessed at $21.4 million. I heard Vanessa inhale sharply beside the wall. Margaret continued calmly. "Investment holdings totaling $4.6 million. Linda and my father exchanged quick looks. Greed changes people physically. You can actually watch it happen sometimes. Their entire posture shifted. Suddenly alert, hungry, Margaret turned another page. "We now proceed to Article 5 regarding exclusions and specific family determinations." My mother smiled faintly. That smile disappeared 10 seconds later. I intentionally make no provision for my brother-in-law Gregory Carter, Margaret read aloud, for reasons I wish formally entered into record. Dad's face drained immediately. Margaret continued. In 2010, Gregory Carter and his wife voluntarily relinquished all parental rights and responsibilities regarding their daughter, Evelyn Carter, transferring full legal guardianship to me through signed and notarized documentation. Linda shot upright instantly. What does that have to do with this? Margaret didn't even look up. By executing those documents, she continued calmly, Gregory and Linda Carter legally severed parental connection to Evelyn Carter and forfeited any derivative familial standing related to my designated heir. The room went completely silent. Martin Hale stopped writing, actually stopped. That's how I knew he hadn't known either. My father looked physically sick now, but my mother looked terrified, because suddenly the paperwork she signed 15 years earlier wasn't buried anymore. It was public, official, permanent. Margaret reached into the folder slowly, then placed the certified guardianship document directly onto the conference table. Linda stared at it like it might explode. And honestly, for her, it probably just had. My mother didn't sit back down. She just stood there frozen beside the wall, staring at the guardianship papers like reality itself had betrayed her. That document means nothing, she snapped suddenly. We're still her parents. Margaret finally looked up, cool, professional, unshaken. Legally, she said calmly, you ceased being Evelyn Carter's parents on July 18, 2010. The sentence hit the room like broken glass. Vanessa slowly covered her mouth with one hand. My father looked down at the carpet immediately, and for the first time in my entire life, I watched my mother lose control publicly. She manipulated Nathaniel against us, Linda said sharply, pointing at me. She poisoned him. Interesting, even now, even after everything, she still couldn't admit her own choices created this outcome. One of the charity directors shifted uncomfortably. The executives from Carter Holdings exchanged glances. Nobody looked convinced by her performance. Good. Margaret continued reading before Linda could interrupt again. Evelyn Carter is not simply my beneficiary, she read from Nathaniel's will. She is my daughter in every way that matters legally, emotionally, and morally. My throat tightened instantly. I hadn't known the exact wording. Across the room, Linda's face turned pale. Actually pale, because suddenly the narrative she'd spent 15 years controlling was collapsing publicly. Margaret continued. She worked beside me for years, demonstrated integrity beyond her age, and earned every opportunity through discipline and character. I looked down briefly because tears were already threatening. Nathaniel knew exactly what to say. Always, then Margaret reached the next paragraph, and because Evelyn Carter was legally adopted by me in September of 2012, the room exploded. What? Vanessa whispered. My father looked genuinely stunned. But my mother looked horrified. Adopted? She repeated weakly. Margaret nodded once. The adoption was finalized through King County Family Court following the relinquishment of parental rights. No additional consent was legally required. Linda sat down heavily after that, like her knees simply stopped working. Because now the truth stood fully exposed, they didn't just lose me emotionally, they lost me legally too. Nathaniel hadn't simply raised me, he became my father, officially, permanently, and suddenly their entire inheritance argument disappeared. No family connection, no parental standing, nothing. Martin Hale slowly removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead. That told me everything. The case was dead. Margaret reached for another envelope then. There is also a personal letter Nathaniel requested be read aloud if legal challenges arose regarding the estate. My chest tightened immediately. I already knew this would hurt. Margaret unfolded the handwritten page carefully. Nathaniel's handwriting filled the paper. Messy, strong, familiar. Evelyn, she read softly, if this letter is being heard publicly, then events unfolded exactly the way I expected. A tiny broken sound escaped my mother's throat. Margaret kept reading. You arrived in my life as a frightened child abandoned by people who should have protected you, but you never allowed cruelty to define your character. My vision blurred instantly. You transformed rejection into determination, loneliness into resilience, and fear into strength. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Even Linda stayed silent now. I did not rescue you, Margaret continued reading. I simply gave you the environment to become who you already were capable of becoming. God, that line nearly shattered me, because children abandoned young spend years believing survival was luck instead of courage. Nathaniel never let me believe that. You owe your biological relatives nothing, the letter continued. Not guilt, not access, not forgiveness purchased through obligation. Linda lowered her eyes completely then. First time all afternoon. Interesting, maybe truth becomes harder to avoid when spoken by dead people who prepared receipts. Margaret read the final line softly. You were always worthy of love, Evelyn. Never let anyone convince you otherwise again. Forever proud to be your father, Nathaniel. Silence swallowed the room afterward, heavy, complete. And then my mother made one final desperate mistake. She looked directly at me and whispered, "We're still blood." That's when I finally stood up. I stood slowly from my chair and looked directly at my mother. For a moment, nobody in that room moved. Not the attorneys, not the executives, not even Vanessa. The entire conference room felt suspended in silence. My mother's eyes were wet now, but I noticed something important immediately. She still wasn't crying because she lost me. She was crying because she lost control of the story. There's a difference. We're still blood, she repeated weakly. I stared at her for several seconds before answering. You stopped being my family the night you left me on that porch. The words came out calmer than I expected, not angry. Not emotional, just true. My father flinched visibly. Linda opened her mouth immediately. We were struggling financially. No, I interrupted quietly. You were struggling morally. That landed harder than shouting ever could. Martin Hale looked like a man regretting every career decision that led him into this room. Vanessa stared at the floor, and suddenly I realized something strange. I didn't hate any of them anymore. Hate requires emotional attachment. This felt different, final. I was 13 years old, I continued softly. You packed my belongings into garbage bags because I refused to surrender my future for Vanessa's camp tuition. Vanessa closed her eyes instantly. Interesting, maybe she remembered more than I thought. You didn't just send me away, I said. You signed documents erasing me from your lives. Linda's voice cracked suddenly. We thought Nathaniel would take care of you. That sentence almost made me laugh because even now she framed abandonment like generosity. He did, I answered calmly. That's why I survived. Silence again. Margaret allowed it to breathe naturally. Professional woman, smart enough to understand some truths shouldn't be interrupted. Linda tried one last pivot then. Classic manipulation strategy, move from denial into guilt. We made mistakes, she whispered, but 15 years is a long punishment. Punishment, interesting choice of word, as though consequences happening naturally somehow counted as cruelty against her. I looked at her carefully. No, I said softly, the punishment was what happened to me. This is just accountability. That sentence changed the room completely, because suddenly everyone there understood exactly what this actually was, not revenge, consequences. Nathaniel anticipated every argument they might make and dismantled them before dying. That level of preparation still amazes me. Margaret closed the wool folder carefully then. The estate challenge has no standing, she announced professionally. All claims are formally denied. Martin Hale didn't even object. That told me everything. My father finally stood slowly from his chair, older, smaller somehow. Like reality aged him 10 years in 2 hours. He looked at me briefly before speaking for the first time all afternoon. I should have stopped it. God, that sentence, because deep down I think he finally understood. Weakness can destroy children just as effectively as cruelty. I nodded once. Yes, I answered honestly. No comfort, no rescue from guilt. Some truths deserve to stay heavy. Vanessa gathered her purse quietly then. Before leaving, she looked at me one final time. I'm sorry, she whispered, and strangely, I believed her. Not enough to rebuild a relationship instantly, but enough to know there was actual regret there. Real regret sounds different than manipulation. You feel it. Linda tried speaking again, but Martin Hale gently touched her arm. Mrs. Carter, he said quietly, it's time to go. And just like that, the people who discarded me 15 years earlier walked out of the conference room with nothing. No money, no victory, no control, only the truth. After they left, the room stayed silent for several seconds. Then one of the charity directors smiled at me softly. Your father was very proud of you, she said, your father. Not Nathaniel, not guardian, father. And for the first time in my entire life, that word finally felt safe. If this story meant something to you, subscribe and leave a comment telling me the moment you realized someone's treatment of you said more about them than it ever did about you. And remember, the people who truly love you will never make you earn your right to belong.